Good morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night, whether you are tuning in via YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m., you are being greeted by myself, AJ Carrion, my co-host, Ben Weiner, and our very welcome guest, Jack Cavanagh, for this episode of the Pylon Dons. Ben, how are we doing today?
I am doing great, and I'm so happy that Jack was able to join us today. Jack is a host at Believe Network, along with Nonsense Fantasy Football. He's a good buddy of mine from the Twitter sphere, and we love talking about some fantasy football. So, Jack, welcome on to the Pylon Dons, baby.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor to actually get to speak to you, Ben, and AJ as well. It's very nice to meet you.
He's a good guy. I like him. We'll keep him around.
Seems great. Great host. Great introduction. Just very excited to get to talk to the two of you because it's March, but that's the best time to talk about fantasy football, isn't it?
You know, I tend to agree. This is the time of year where the casuals are stowed away and all the people really tapped into the underbelly of fantasy football and what's going on are really going through all this stuff. So the people who are tuning in now, they're following along almost as closely, if not just as closely as the three of us are to everything that's going on with free agency, NFL draft hype. And we're going to focus on free agency in this episode and talk about not necessarily the guys that have been changing teams, but some of those players that have been influenced, whether they're staying on the same team or not, by other players' moves. And so that's going to be a lot of fun to sort of break down what we think these guys are going to be able to do, whether we think they're a buy or a sell, or maybe you want to just hold the line. Before we get into it, Jack, do you have any socials that you want to plug for the people?
You can find me everywhere at Cavanagh87, and you can find me at the Believe Network and at Believe in Lions on Twitter as well.
Cavanagh, that is a great conjunction. That really does flow. I like it.
I love it.
Because it's funny, because whenever we're tweeting at each other, I'm like, oh, there's Jack Cavanagh. And I guess I don't spend enough time looking at people's handles, but Cavanagh, like a javelin, I like it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you please, AJ, please.
So for our socials, as always, we are going to tell you guys to tune into our Twitters at AJ the Pylon Don, at Ben the Pylon Don, at Pylon Dons on Twitter, and at the Pylon Dons on Instagram. And if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to check us out and throw us a subscribe. If you're new to the YouTube, it's Pylon Dons Fantasy Football. And without further ado, I think we're ready to get into it.
And shout out First Gaming!
Shout out First Gaming. Great sponsor. Always a great time with them. So let's get right into it. The first player we've got on the agenda is Mike Evans. So Brady unretired. After announcing his retirement, Chris Godwin is currently injured. They did bring in Russell Gage. They did bring back Leonard Fournette. This offense looks more or less the same with a new wide receiver 3 and potentially not a healthy Godwin to start the year. So, Jack, how are you currently feeling about Mike Evans, not only for the upcoming season, but in Dynasty as well?
For Dynasty, I'm looking to get out on him because he is an aging ex-receiver. And he's still in his prime, but those outside clashers, as we just saw with Julio Jones, it's a quick plummet. So in Dynasty, I'm more than happy to sell him at the top of his game. However, if I'm in a win now mode where I want to go all out for this season, or if I'm in redraft, all in on Mike Evans for 2022, because Godwin's going to be brought along slowly. Gronk is obviously going to re-sign, but he's another year older. And Antonio Brown is no longer a threat in Tampa Bay for targets. So Mike Evans, he averaged 7.4 targets per game last year. That's going up for sure, especially early in the season. And what might even be the best option is you hold Mike Evans now until about October, November, when Chris Godwin's fully healthy. He goes back to the wide receiver 1 in Tampa, and then you sell Mike Evans either in Dynasty or during the season.
I got to tell you, you had me in the first half, not going to lie. And I think one of the great things with AJ and I, we love having guests on the show because they bring in a different perspective. And I have been sipping, much like you out of your wonderful red cup, I have been sipping on the Mike Evans Kool-Aid for a minute now because age 29 next season. He's been unbelievable, very consistent, always been a top 15 guy. And the thing that I really like about Mike Evans is it feels like everything around him is changing. I was on Mike Evans even before Tom Brady was back because I view him to be a pretty quarterback-proof wide receiver, given his work with Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick over the years as well. But Chris Godwin and Russell Gage, like there's definitely some questions there with Gage being integrated into the offense and how Godwin looks in return from injury. And Gronk hasn't been re-signed yet. And I just feel like the only constant in this Tampa Bay offense is truly Mike Evans at that outside receiver spot. And I'm just getting flashbacks to 172 target wide receiver 2 overall Mike Evans. And I really think he, like you said, all in, I think he has one more big year in him before it starts to hit a little bit of a slower decline.
Yeah, absolutely. And in redraft, he's being pretty much drafted closer to the wide receiver 24 than he is the wide receiver 12. And this is a guy who's finished inside the top 15 with 3 different quarterbacks. So he's no stranger to adversity. He's no stranger to double coverage either. We know that from his resume. My main concern with the Bucs as a whole is they brought back Leonard Fournette, and I really do think they're going to be extremely run heavy, probably more than the average fan thinks, because I think you bring in an aging running back who just had arguably his best season on a 3-year contract. Yeah, but you're going to want to really utilize Leonard Fournette when Tom Brady is entering his age 45 season. So I do love Mike Evans for redraft. I loved what you said about selling him mid-season potentially. And I think if you can get him from a team that necessarily isn't built to win in Dynasty at a slight discount, I'd be buying him there as well, just with the potential for what he can bring to a potential playoff roster.
That's the key, is the playoff roster, the 2022 season. We're all in on that. It's just he's getting up there in age.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with seeing, just seeing. You don't have to pull the trigger. Just see what you can get for Mike Evans as he ages, because again, Julio Jones is who I'm going to point to. It's a quick drop off for these physical monsters on the outside.
Absolutely. Trust me, Ben and I are definitely no stranger to testing the trade market with anybody and everybody on the roster. So I definitely like what you said there. Next up, we're going to discuss Devin Singletary. So the big thing with Devin Singletary is people thought Buffalo was a candidate to bring in a running back, even though he did finish the season quite strongly. Buffalo really hasn't addressed their weapons room to the extent that we thought they might. They released Cole Beasley. Emmanuel Sanders is no longer on the roster, and they really only have added O.J. Howard. So less weapons all around. How are you feeling about Devin Singletary right now, Ben?
For me with Devin Singletary, and like anyone can check my Twitter receipts, I've never really been a fan. I understand he came on really late to end the season, but I don't really put a lot of stock in the 2 meaningless games against the New York Jets and the Atlanta Falcons. Personally, hate to say it. I know that he played pretty solid in the playoffs, had a decent game against New England, but he really wasn't efficient in that game against Kansas City. So call me a hater, call me a skeptic. There could be some bias here, but I've just never really bought in on the talent. So I think eventually there will be an upgrade there. They did bring in Duke Johnson, #free Duke Johnson. One of these days, maybe. One of these days, Duke Johnson RB1 season. It probably will never happen again, but hey, a kid can dream. But I would say is, I guess I can't really sell Devin Singletary because there isn't a world where I own him. However, if I had him, I would certainly be looking to get out while I still could. Jack, what do you think?
Don't disagree with a word you just said. I don't have Devin. Well, I have Devin Singletary in a couple leagues because I got him at the 14th round when there was the Zach Moss controversy. Turns out Zach Moss is terrible, so he's done for. And I don't know if anyone follows me at Cavanagh87. You can see I post the current lineups for teams for
yes,
every
you do.
team.
Those are awesome. We love those.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for the Bills, I never include Zach Moss because Zach Moss does not matter. However,
I'm honestly pretty grateful for NFL guys who are just sincerely terrible because it saves us so much time on the mic. Like if I don't like, say, like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like a low-hanging fruit, a guy I pick on a lot. He was a first-round draft pick out of LSU. I need to explain why I don't like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but Zach Moss, he makes my job easy. I'm just like, he's bad. And then everyone's like, put on a Bills game. Yeah, that guy's terrible. I'm like, nice.
Yep. Glad we're all on the same page because I'm definitely going to be leaning to sell Singletary as well. This is mostly just because I don't trust Sean McDermott to give Singletary the keys. I think he did it out of pure necessity at the end of the year because, like we said, Zach Moss was awful. Matt Breida couldn't stay healthy, which has been the story for Matt Breida, who's not even on the roster anymore. So I think people are going to think that Devin Singletary has this outside shot at keeping the volume he had to end the season and bringing it into next year. But I think Buffalo could really easily, even if they don't address it in the top half of their drafts, they could definitely bring in a guy in like rounds 3 or 4 that could sort of work in tandem with Devin Singletary, maybe a Ty Chandler, a Kevin Harris, a James Cook, what have you. There's just plenty of options out there that could be plug-and-play guys alongside a guy like Singletary who can get hot but also get very, very cold.
Great analysis, but why are we giving away all the key? Don't say those names. Those are the off-air names. What?
No, I completely agree with all of that, especially with the necessity of making Devin Singletary the bell cow, because he's not a receiver. He wasn't a receiver at Florida Atlantic, and color me skeptical, as Ben has pointed out, of the small, slow running back out of Florida Atlantic. So even if he keeps the RB1 job and they don't add another back, Duke Johnson's going to cut in enough to his receiving volume that Devin Singletary moves from a back-end RB2, middle RB2, to back to an RB3, RB4.
I love the Duke Johnson faith because it really, like, AJ knows that I love Duke Johnson, and especially because he was good in Miami, like, this year. So, like, I agree with you. I don't think it's crazy for Duke Johnson to definitely take a little bit out of that workload. AJ, who's next on the docket?
We're going to keep it in the running back department, and we're going to talk about James Conner. So a little bit of background on James Conner. Did finish as the PPR running back 5, despite not being heavily involved in the receiving game alongside Chase Edmonds, who is now a Miami Dolphin. Christian Kirk obviously has parted ways from the Arizona Cardinals as well. And beyond re-signing Zach Ertz, Arizona has not done much to bring in a ton of weapons. So the future for James Conner is potentially pretty bright, and I'm going to get into why I think he is an absolute buy. So people look at James Conner's age, and at 26 years old, that's usually when running backs begin to fall off. And there's tons of track record of a cap count when it comes to carries, when it comes to years in the NFL. This will be his 6th year in the NFL. He just wrapped up his 5th year. And the injury history is worrisome, but he did just play almost an entire season. And he's got, I think, 12 less career carries than Josh Jacobs, despite being in the league for 2 more years. So to put it in perspective, when you're buying a guy like James Conner, if he can stay healthy, it's not like his running game has been run into the ground at age 26. He hasn't seen over 250 carries since 2019 when he saw, I want to say 275. And he only saw 212 and was still able to put up a top 5 finish. So I think James Conner's a slam dunk buy. They gave him a 3-year contract. There's not as many receiving weapons as of yet. And I do think the Cardinals could add one, but James Conner's alone in that backfield. As much as I love Eno Benjamin, James Conner is truly alone in that backfield. And I think another top 5 finish is not necessarily out of the question.
Yeah, see, I'm disappointed that you had to just poo-poo on Eno Benjamin at the end because I was going to hype him up. But for James Conner, 16 touchdowns on the ground last year, only averaged 3.7 yards per carry. A lot of people will look at that and say, those efficiency numbers, those aren't great. However, I look at the fact that they gave him $7 million per year while Chase Edmonds is getting 6.2 with Miami. The Cardinals could have had Chase Edmonds back for cheaper. They clearly value James Conner and what he brings to this offense. And even if he just has this exact same role, he's going to see more carries because 124 carries from Chase Edmonds gone and 52 targets from Chase Edmonds gone. But I don't want to forget about Eno Benjamin because Cliff Kingsbury at the Combine hyped him up. This was before they re-signed either. It was, we probably only have enough money for one of them, but Eno Benjamin is really, really good. And then you look at Eno Benjamin's skill set, and it is much closer to Chase Edmonds than it is to James Conner. And so, as I said, that's 176 opportunities gone from Chase Edmonds. Why can't Eno Benjamin take, say, 130 of those, even if we give Conner that boost?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily out of the realm of possibility. I mean, Eno Benjamin drafted in the 7th round, but garnered a lot of hype in the dynasty community last offseason just because of his raw speed, and he does have hands as well. Ben, what do you think about James Conner as a whole?
Well, first off, after the Duke Johnson followed by the Eno Benjamin truthers, Jack has certainly secured himself an invite back. There's no question about that. Certainly a great guest already. But James Conner keeps me up at night. And everything that both of you just said that works for James Conner resonates with me. And I see and I agree with. He's a great running back. Not a lot of tread on the tires. They clearly value him a lot of touchdowns. The thing that scares me with James Conner as a buy is that I'm worried about some slight regression from this Arizona Cardinals offense as a whole. And additionally, I don't know how much I trust this Arizona Cardinals front office. Just because they value James Conner doesn't mean in my eyes that they made the right decision. Look at their draft records over the years. Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, most recently Rondell Moore. This is a front office that is prone to mistakes. And my concern is that the running back, who talent's never been the question with James Conner, and of course the first year he's healthy, he's unbelievable. But could it have possibly been fool's gold? My concern is that those injury concerns over the years were really, really substantial. And there was a reason why James Conner was going where he was prior in those later rounds of drafts or low rookie picks in trades and dynasty leagues. So I guess my feeling on James Conner, because we're not doing holds, you have to buy or sell. I'm going to buy, just not aggressively, because I believe in the role, I believe in the player, but I'm not willing to lay it all out on the line for James Conner. I'm not willing to empty the wallet, empty the 401k. I can't do it. But if he's on my roster, if he's in my RB2 spot, I'm excited about him.
Totally agree. We'll bring it over to quarterback to switch it up. I want to talk about Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, this offense has seen a complete overhaul, whether you like the signings or not. And I think many people have their 2 cents to share about all this money they've thrown at not high earning players in the past. I'll put it nicely. It's going to be an upgrade for Trevor Lawrence, who is working with basically nothing. They bring in Doug Peterson, who has a track record of producing not only fantasy options in the receiving game, but also fantasy viable quarterbacks as well. So, Jack, how do you feel about Trevor Lawrence, not only in Dynasty, but in redraft?
Oh, in Dynasty, I think he is an absolute value because people got sour on him last year. When he was outperformed by Mac Jones, of all people, that got a lot of people worried. And so if you can convince someone that Trevor Lawrence is, if people have given up on Trevor Lawrence, that he's not the golden child he was, then he's an absolute buy. Because say what you want about the money they spent and the wiseness of it, but the Jaguars offense got better this year. Laquan Treadwell goes from wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 4. That's a good thing.
And hey, Laquan Treadwell wide receiver 1 season was fun. That was a good time. And AJ's going to buy him for me in Dynasty. He's going to give me a 3rd round rookie pick. I'm going to talk him into it.
Oh, goodness. I don't know if I would do that. But
I don't think he's going to. I'm hoping. We'll see. We'll talk about it. We'll take that off air.
But Ben, for Trevor Lawrence, we'll keep it more dynasty centric, just because in redraft, especially single QB redraft, odds are he's likely closer to a streaming option than he is a draftable quarterback, at least at this point in time. So for dynasty, are you buying or selling Trevor Lawrence?
Buying.
What's a hero? What is a hero without an origin story? This was the golden child. This is the man who hasn't lost a football game since he was potty trained. Like, seriously, this man was goated. This is the first piece of adversity that we've really seen Trevor Lawrence go through in his football career. Not NFL career, football career, like pretty much ever. And everyone's focusing on all of these signings. They're focusing on Christian Kirk, my boy. They're focusing on no hands Evan Engram. They're focusing on Zay Jones, bad signing, whatever. What no one's talking about is they signed Brandon Scherf. And they're upgrading this O-line. And I personally think that they're going to take a tackle at the first overall pick. That's my hope anyway. So what I'm seeing is a team that, while they could be a little bit misguided, their heart is in the right place. And they are trying to make life better for Trevor Lawrence. I think Doug Peterson will certainly be beneficial to him as not only a coach, but a mentor. Doug Peterson, and I know from firsthand experience, PTSD, excuse me, but a Super Bowl winning head coach. Let's go Patriots. So I really think that it can only get better for Trevor Lawrence. And as bad as he was last year, it wasn't like the arm strength wasn't there. It wasn't like he wasn't athletic. All the tools are still there, and it can only go up. So I have to call him a buy.
Yeah, people really, I think, especially in the dynasty community, those that turned the tide on him very quickly, forgot just how bad Urban Meyer truly was to this locker room. And what a coach like that, probably one of the worst coaching tenures we've seen in NFL history, can do to a rookie quarterback. I don't care if you're a 4th-round pick or if you're the first overall pick. If you're taking your first snaps in the NFL with a guy who doesn't know who Aaron Donald is, it's a pretty bad spell of what's to come. So I really do think Trevor Lawrence is a buy, and I'm glad we're all on the same page. I do actually think that him playing alongside a hopefully healthy Travis Etienne will help as well.
Well, so since we're all on the same page, I have an additional follow-up question for the group that will hopefully spark some disagreement. Dynasty League, single quarterback, 4-point passing touchdown. What are you willing to pay for Trevor Lawrence? One quarterback league, so only top 12 guys really matter. What are you willing to pay? Because I still prefer Trey Lance personally. The situation's too good. Maybe you compare him to Justin Fields, but would you be willing to trade a late 1st-round pick, a high 2nd-round pick? One head went up and down, one went left to right. We have a conversation topic.
I guess, Jack, I'll let you go ahead first.
Okay, well, first I want to add another point to the Trevor Lawrence hype is everyone forgets that he had shoulder surgery before the draft. His college career ended. That's why he didn't throw throughout the pre-draft process, because he had shoulder surgery. So another year removed from that, that's a good thing. However, when it comes to fantasy football, offering a late first in a 1 QB league, there's a lot of wide receiver talent that's available there. And I don't think it's worth passing on players. Chris Olave, maybe that's a little bit late for him, but early second, Jahan Dotson, and even these running backs are starting to slip a little bit. You can find Isaiah Spiller going at the 201 at the latest at this point. So
I want to get into that league.
I know. I've seen it twice now where he's gone 112, 201.
Wow. Send me an invite if you get the sleeper link. I will
not my
away.
league.
So yeah, when you bring up the prospects, it makes me reconsider my answer. To put it in perspective, in single quarterback, a guy of Joe Burrow's caliber was going at around the 205 in single quarterback. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence was going as high as the 108 in single quarterback just because of the hype. Yeah, so I don't know. I think you've done a very good job of changing my mind. If we're talking 204, sort of when the wide receiver dip post George Pickens, post Jahan Dotson, post Sky Moore, Christian Watson.
Post Sky Moore. So we would not trade Sky Moore for Trevor Lawrence in a single quarterback league.
I don't think I would. No.
Okay.
So, but once you hit that tier 2 drop off of receivers, and maybe you're not getting the Zamir Whites or Rashad Whites either, then we could talk Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, exactly. And follow up on that. If you have the pick, Malik Willis is there for you. The GM of Trevor Lawrence offers you Trevor Lawrence for the pick.
I'm taking that and running. I am running. So, Jack, I don't know if you know this. I'm like, I don't like to trash guys unless their name's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I get a real kick out of that one personally. And I just have one league mate who like has Clyde, and it's like honestly a bit of a running joke. It's every single time I tweet something negative about Clyde, it's a subtweet at Eric Greenstein. So Clyde, if you're out there listening, we're all cool, man. It's nothing personal. So I don't tweet a lot about this often because I don't want to be so negative, but I really don't want anything to do with these rookie quarterbacks. I know people are warming up to Malik Willis. I just personally think that they are looking at the best quarterback in a bad room of quarterbacks. Personally, I think some of them will be all right NFL guys, but none of these guys in my mind are as good as Mac Jones or Zach Wilson. I almost said Mac Wilson. A little bit tired, need some coffee. But yeah, I would absolutely rather have Trevor Lawrence over Malik Willis, and it's not particularly close for me.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm going to take it over to a fun little segment. We are going to actually just each say our piece on the 3 Broncos receivers. So Ben and I have talked very briefly on air in introductions about the Russell Wilson news, but we haven't really taken a dive into the receivers, at least given them their due diligence that I think they deserve. Jack, I know you wanted to start with Cortland Sutton, and then Ben will take it over for Jerry Jeudy.
So Cortland Sutton last year not only had to deal with horrible quarterback play from Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, and that's a negative sign for DK Metcalf's future as it stands right now, but Sutton was also coming off an ACL tear. And with just one drop last season, Sutton only caught 61.1% of his targets. So you get him a quarterback that will actually throw it downfield accurately, a QB that can hit him, on the back shoulder fade. That is where where Cortland Sutton is going to shine. Because if you remember back in 2019, when fully healthy, his quarterbacks were Flacco and Drew Lock and Brandon Allen, and he still managed over 1,100 yards, 15.4 yards per reception, and scored 6 of the 16 passing TDs for Denver. So when you think about it in terms of Russell Wilson, you have the alpha in Cortland Sutton, the DK Metcalf, you have the Jerry Jeudy, the Tyler Lockett, and then you have Tim Patrick / KJ Hamler as the Freddie Swain.
I love Freddie Swain. I'm happy you brought him up. We're not going to touch upon him anymore, but I remember very vividly, AJ, I told you a couple of years ago, I put you on to Freddie Swain because he had this great touchdown grab where he got both feet down on a toe tap, and there was like a penalty away from the play, and I was like, I need to get my hands on this guy. Like, he's pretty good. So Jack, I agree with everything you said about Cortland Sutton. I really like Cortland Sutton. However, I love Jerry Jeudy. I'm going to be drafting Cortland Sutton this year. I think he's a great dynasty ad. And in leagues where I don't have Jerry Jeudy, I'm certainly going to have some Cortland Sutton. I'm going to have Sutton as a top 24 guy, but I'm going to have Jerry Jeudy higher. And the thing with Jerry Jeudy is that things just haven't really broken the right way for him. So this Jerry Jeudy take goes back a long way. I've had Jerry Jeudy. He was my favorite receiver in that 2020 prospect class. I preferred him at the time, way back. So please, no one get it twisted. At the time, I had him over Justin Jefferson. I had him over CD Lamb. I thought his talent was the most translatable. I thought he had the best hands, the best route running. Obviously, what Justin Jefferson has done goes without saying. But I think his value to me right now is pretty comparable to CD Lamb because I look at Jerry Jeudy's season last year. Oh, I know it's not, but that's just how I feel about this. This is me. Yeah. I'm not saying go trade CD Lamb for Jerry Jeudy. I'm just saying is if I have Jerry Jeudy, I'm not going to add anything to go get CD Lamb. That's what I'm saying because we've all the whole time we said Jerry Jeudy needs a quarterback. He has one. Last year, Jerry Jeudy comes in for about 18 minutes of football, and he gives the New York Giants 6 for 72 before he gets injured. I know he came back. I know he was healthy, but he's a young player. He missed 7-8 weeks of the season. He missed a lot of time, was rushing back. The Broncos were trying to just win some games and get on the board. There was quarterback switches. There was inconsistency. Now that Jerry Jeudy, with all of his talent, can come in, he's a veteran now. It's his 3rd season in the league. and he's going to be having a whole offseason with Russell Wilson. I think it's time to cash in on that talent that we have been eyeing for so long. He very well could be one of the 5 or 10 best route runners in football, and Russell Wilson is going to get him that ball. I really think that it's not even too late to buy him in Dynasty. I think sky's the limit for him. Additionally, though, and this is no bad track, Cortland Sutton is great too. Go get them both. You can't go wrong. I personally view this as, I know it's funny, but how Tyler Lockett last year, wide receiver 15. Need to double check off the top of my head, but DK Metcalf was a little bit lower, I want to say, off the top of my head.
Also in that high-end wide receiver 2 range.
And that's kind of where I have. I think Jerry Jeudy has a chance to be a fringe wide receiver 1, and Cortland Sutton, in my eyes, is one of the best wide receiver 2s you can have. I'm also very, very bullish on Jerry Jeudy, and I understand that.
Yeah, just watch just watch it be the wide receiver 14 and 15 from Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, and it don't matter at all.
Totally within the range of outcomes. Would not surprise me, but you know what? I'm okay with that, because all that tells me is that at the end of the day, I know I just droned on and on and on about how much I love Jerry Jeudy, whatever. My whole point was that they're both really good. So if there's a wide receiver 14 and 15, all I hear is that my process was wonderful.
So I've got my own opinions about Cortland Sutton, but the 16 yards per game that he had once Jerry Jeudy returned, and believe me, as a Javonte Williams owner, I watched too many Broncos games, and I know just how putrid that passing offense was. But I don't think they're going to necessarily shy away from the run and let Russ throw 50 times a game right out the gate. And that could potentially hurt Cortland Sutton. And that brings me to my best ball darling, Tim Patrick. In Dynasty, I'm not touching him. He's a 28-year-old wide receiver 3. There's not really much there. In redraft, once you hit the double-digit rounds, a guy like Tim Patrick, who finished as the wide receiver 42 last year, but flashed some phenomenal flex upside, is going to be somebody that falls under the radar in a lot of leagues. And I really think that you're going to be able to snag him at an absolute discount, plug and play him more than a few times, and get some pretty good results.
Especially when the buys hit, you're going to want Tim Patrick in your wide receiver 3 flex slot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when it's week 7 and there's 6 teams on bye and Stephon Diggs is gone or whatever, and Tim Patrick gives you 16, you're going to be over the moon.
Yeah.
So before we move on, because I just went on an absolute tangent, Jack, do you have any feedback or constructive criticism about my lofty Jerry Jeudy hopes? Because I told you what I thought about Cortland Sutton. How do you feel about what I said about Jerry Jeudy?
Well, I did.
You can burst my bubble.
No, I did call him the Tyler Lockett of this offense. I think Jerry Jeudy, as you said, he is already one of the best route runners in the NFL with a quarterback that can actually get him the ball. There's no reason that he can't have a better season than Cortland Sutton. Just when you look at the prototype, Cortland Sutton is the alpha. He is that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he is that guy that Russell Wilson can throw it up to. And that is where my personal bias comes in. I love those throwback monsters on the outside. Big Allen Robinson fan. Hope he does well with the Rams this year. So when you have that type of receiver, I'm usually going to side with them.
Totally reasonable. And also, and not to self-deprecate my Jerry Jeudy take, I will say, as a frugal man, the Cortland Sutton ADP being a little lower, it is tasty. It is appetizing. But really, I think you can't go wrong with either. So
yeah, and I hear the arguments for both sides. I totally agree. I just got burned really bad by Cortland Sutton, and there definitely is some of that coming into play.
Let me toss you a reminder, though, because I got burned on Joe Mixon, and look where that got me. So maybe open up that think tank of yours, because sometimes, man, second time is the charm. Yeah.
We're going to take it over. We've got 2 more. First, I want to talk about the Detroit Lions pass catchers. Amon Brown and TJ Hawkinson. Jack, as the resident Lions fan, of course, I want you to go first. We did mention they brought in DJ Chark. DeAndre Swift will be fully healthy. They are picking 3 times inside the top 40. So what do you think? not only for the current structure of the offense, but do you think there's more to be added to this offense, and how could it potentially impact Amon-Ra and TJ?
I definitely do think more will be added to this offense. If you heard the wide receivers coach, who we all know, Antoine Randall L., the former Steelers receiver, he has said that the Lions, he's begging them to draft at least 2 receivers. I'm assuming that means at least 1, but probably what happens either with that 32nd, that 34th, or that second pick of the 3rd round, one of those will be a wide receiver. I'm hoping for Christian Watson personally, because I like the
Go, Jack! You're coming back on the show. Jack, you're coming back on the show.
You're talking about all of our favorite players.
Let's go, Christian Watson.
Perfect.
Woo!
So I do think that makes it tough for the target share to predict how it's going to go, but it's going to make the offense better, which means DeAndre Swift is going to score more touchdowns. It means TJ Hawkinson is going to score more touchdowns. And even with a rookie wide receiver, that's really not going to impact Amon-Ra St. Brown, because his role is kind of the new Cooper Kupp for Jared Goff. And I'm not comparing the talent. I'm comparing the role as that slot guy, getting the crossers, getting the quick hitters, because that's what Jared Goff thrives on. So I'm not necessarily in love with DJ Chark for fantasy this year, because Jared Goff has proven he's often afraid to throw that deep ball to Brandon Cooks when he can just throw it to Jared Goff to Cooper Kupp over the middle. So I expect them to add their Robert Woods, and that's a player that could have some fantasy value down the road, but for now, I think we still have the core 3 of Hawkinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and DeAndre Swift.
Can I go really meta for a second? Can I go like big picture?
Yeah, take it away.
So first off, Jack, I'm not the world's biggest Amon-Ra St. Brown fan. He certainly has exceeded my expectations coming out of USC 100%. I was not a fan of his for the rookie draft, and it's very evident he can do a lot of things well on an NFL field. So at this point, it's nothing with the talent. My concern, I don't like the fact that they want to bring in more wide receivers, and the players are bringing in, I know that they like those crossing routes and that Cooper Kupp role, but bringing in an alpha like DJ Chark, a 6'4" speedster who's tall, and then they want to go in and draft all these other guys, it doesn't make me feel like they're building around Amon-Ra. It almost makes me feel like that they view Amon-Ra as the piece, and they're trying to get their main course. That's how it feels to me. So I wouldn't really call him a sell, because Amon-Ra is going to be around for a while and he's young, but I do think that we are never going to see a stretch like we just saw out of him again. And I'm very comfortable saying that on air. I'll tweet it. People can have the receipts. Now let's get meta big picture with TJ Hawkinson really quickly, because I don't think TJ Hawkinson is going to have the best year of his career next season. Even in what, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, is a contract year or the year before his option, one or the other? It's been a couple years now for TJ.
He'll be going into his 4th season.
Yeah, so into his year when they're going to pick up his option and he's potentially up for an extension. And I think that TJ Hawkinson started off last year really strong before he got hurt, and things went downhill as they do for TJ Hawkinson. There's always the flashes. But TJ Hawkinson is going to be back with the Detroit Lions. He's not going anywhere. I think that people forget that TJ Hawkinson was Kyle Pitts before Kyle Pitts. TJ Hawkinson was the best tight end prospect we've ever seen before Kyle Pitts came along. And Detroit invested very, very heavily in him. And frankly, he's been really good when he's been on the field. So what I'm getting at here is that we also know that it takes tight ends years to break out. Some tight ends don't have their best season until they're 28, 29 years old. So what I would tell you is that if you're a dynasty contender and next year your team needs a big push, I don't think TJ Hawkinson is going to be your guy, but I think now could be a very, very good opportunity to go buy TJ Hawkinson, because you may need to wait, but his time will come. And especially if he stays in Detroit like I think he will, and if they bring in a CJ Stroud, a Bryce Young, what do rookie quarterbacks love more than their friendly, reliable neighborhood tight end? Like, seriously, like, I don't think, like, TJ Hawkinson, honestly, may not be a top 8 tight end next year, but he's still a buy in my eyes because he's the 401k. He will have his moment in the sun. That's my opinion anyway.
And I
Was
think
that
the
meta?
best,
That was
pretty
awesome.
meta.
I'm glad you spoke your 2 cents, because you and I, even off camera, don't really talk about TJ Hawkinson. And as somebody who has bought him and drafted him in startups, and unfortunately has had to deal with the spells of him being injured, it's hard to not let my biases come out. But I've really, really tried to, because we're getting to the point where people are valuing the guy who was taken 8th overall in the NFL draft closer to guys like Dallas Goedert and Dawson Knox, and not close enough to guys like George Kittle, where he was right next to last year. And he didn't play badly last year at all. The Lions were just an absolute mess, whether it was Swift not being able to stay healthy, or the only other receivers on the field being Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds, what have you. Things were not lining up for TJ Hawkinson to succeed, and he was still able to be a top 5 tight end through the first 8 weeks of the season. So he was still putting up very, very, very valuable performances for you. His consistency just wasn't there. But if this whole offense sees an upgrade, whether it be by bringing in a receiver, or whether it be by addressing the O-line, both I think they will do, TJ Hawkinson's value is not going to be the thing that takes a hit. And for Amon-Ra St. Brown as well, I think now is a good time to buy, because trust me, if you've stumbled into fantasy football Twitter, Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably the first, second, and third name you end up seeing. People are very polarized on him. What I find funny is the people who are anti-Amon-Ra are like, yeah, maybe he's a low-end wide receiver too, but I don't think you can buy him at cost. His ADP is wide receiver 27. People think that you have to buy him at an absolute premium, especially in redraft. He's right outside the top 24 in best ball right now. So I think Amon-Ra is definitely a buy. I think his PPR floor is about as high as they come. I think he's completely earned his volume in that offense after what he did to end the season, regardless of who they bring in. So personally, I'm very comfortable buying both of these guys as well.
Yeah, and with Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially, where was I going to go with this? I completely lost my train of thought. Something about Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Amon-Ra.
Something about TJ Hawkinson, though. The good thing about him is everyone compared him to George Kittle. He's not the blocker that George Kittle is, and that's a good thing for fantasy football because it means he runs more routes.
I think George Kittle's going to do a lot of blocking this year, but I'll save that for another day.
But he's a yak daddy, and he only needs 4 targets for 4 receptions.
This will be the argument We'll save it for another day. Last topic, and we're going to keep it in the NFC North for this one. Another tandem to conclude the show. Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney. This is a Chicago Bears team that is coming into the NFL draft with only 1 pick inside the top 50, picking at 41, if I'm not mistaken. They've pretty much only brought in Byron Pringle. They released Tariq Cohen. The Bills just matched that offer on Ryan Jones, so that offensive line isn't necessarily seeing the upgrade that it needs. But I'm just going to get right into it. I'm buying both of these guys. I talked down on Darnell Mooney about a month ago because I was a believer that the Chicago Bears were really going to overhaul this offense in some regard, especially with the new hire at the head coach. But they really haven't done that. There's going to be so many negative game scripts. They're going to be worse than the Detroit Lions. They're going to be worse than the Jacksonville Jaguars. This team could be the worst team in the NFL, and it means a lot of targets for Darnell Mooney and a lot of time running outside the pocket for Justin Fields. And that means a lot of fantasy points for the both of them, and I think you can get them both at an absolute bargain.
Yeah, we just saw Jalen Hurts put up numbers in fantasy football, and I think Justin Fields is significantly better than Hurts. And I like Hurts, but Fields is better. And in terms of Darnell Mooney, alphas come in all shapes and sizes at wide receiver. Darnell Mooney, he's not the prototype that you see on the outside, but that's not a bad thing. At 5'11", he doesn't have to take on the press coverage because they'll probably have Byron Pringle on the line of scrimmage. And if they draft a wide receiver, that doesn't mean anything for Mooney because it's going to be a year or 2 before he's in sync with Justin Fields. So, Darnell Mooney, he saw 134 targets last year, over 1,000 yards. With Allen Robinson gone and really only Byron Pringle and Cole Kmet to compete with. That's going up quite a bit. Might be the cheapest alpha wide receiver you can get. It's him and it's Alan Lazard right now.
The people don't need to know about Alan Lazard just yet. You got to keep that one in your pocket for the next time you come on the show.
I don't know about.
All right,
but maybe Alan Lazard.
We'll keep it in Chicago.
Oh yeah, we're gonna keep it in Chicago. But
the
second we jump off the mic, I just know it's gonna be an explosion of Alan Lazard conversation. Because now I got to think about Chicago. The only thing going through my mind right now is Alan Lazard. But to keep it in Chicago, I texted AJ today because I was. So first off, Darnell Mooney, I don't know, Jack, if you've ever seen AJ and I, we've honestly slowed down a little bit with the written work. We need to get back to it. But we used to do this series called the Diamond Miners, where we would find like the Darnell Mooneys of the world and just to kind of like profile them and give out like just basic information about why we like these guys and why they're worth shots later in your fantasy drafts. And Darnell Mooney, Diamond Miners 2, baby, pride and joy. I told you he was the guy, and he was really, really good. And my big concern with Darnell Mooney was I really was into this storyline. They're going to bring in a receiver because they have Justin Fields and Allen Robinson was such a disappointment this year, and they really haven't done anything. And the big thing for me was when Chris Olave's draft stock went up, I knew he was not going to be on the board in the second round for the Chicago Bears. I thought like pre-NFL Combine, there was talk of Chris Olave maybe slipping into that second round, and that's off the table now. So for me, I'm looking at Darnell Mooney, and I don't think there's a next gear. Even if he improves, I can't see a world where Darnell Mooney makes another jump into a high-end wide receiver 2 territory. But as like the constant in the offense with the rapport with Justin Fields, I don't see why he can't be a low-end wide receiver 2 again. And sometimes I don't need reasons why something is going to happen as much as I need an absence of reasons working against a player. There's nothing working against Darnell Mooney right now, so why would we detract from him?
Yeah, we don't want to be looking for something that isn't there in terms of reasons to not buy a guy who actually has shown signs of improvement pretty much across the board, especially with a rookie QB who didn't have the best year. So glad to know we're kind of all on the same page with that. And with that, that is going to conclude our free agency reactions to these guys that have remained on these same teams. Jack, I want to thank you so much, and I want to give you the floor to plug any projects you're currently working on or anything going on in your universe right now.
Well, you can find me everywhere at Cavanagh87, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. And you can also find my work over at Believe in Lions on the Believe Network and over at importantnonsense.com. Run a couple podcasts over there. Friends, thank you so much for having me on. It was truly an honor to get to talk to you here tonight.
This was a great time. Before we go, I need one more thing from you, Jack. I need one hot tip for the people. Anything fantasy football related. It can be whatever comes to mind. Just let the world know something controversial in the football world that's going on in that big old brain of yours, my friend.
Lamar Jackson, QB1 once.
Whoa! That's a good one. That's a good hot take.
I love it.
I love it. I love it.
The world forgot about Lamar Jackson.
I love it.
I love it.
Great way to end the show. Awesome stuff. He is Jack Cavanagh, Cavanagh87. He is AJ Carrion. My name is Benjamin Nathan Weiner, but you can just call me Ben. We are the Pylon Dons. Thank you very much for listening. And we will speak with you